This video is sponsored by the following people. Please click the links in the description below.
So I've been sanding the blade. I've already gone through 200 and 300 grit, and now we're on 400 grit. During the whole sanding process, I'm thinking about the geometry of the blade. Most of this middle section here is basically flat. Right down by the edge, I like to take the sanding stick and just hold it over by about 2 degrees and sand just a little bit of a higher angle than the rest of the blade. And again, just over by the spine, I like to hold it roughly 2 degrees over in the other direction, over this way, and that just gives a little bit of space for air to get in behind the food and to help it to fall off. The edge shape of the blade, if we're looking at sort of you cut a cross section of the blade, is going to be kind of curved, so a lot more curved right down by the apex, then it bevels out into a triangle, and then it has another slight curve up by the spine. So the reason we make this convex curved shape, firstly, you have the most possible support behind your edge, so you're least likely to get chips or rolls. Paradoxically, or at least irrationally, this is the best shape as well for cutting food. You'd think if you've got the most meat behind the edge, it's going to cut the worst. But actually, it cuts better because of basically how the food flows around it. If you throw a ball directly against a 90-degree wall, all of the energy bounces straight back towards you. If you throw a ball against a 30-degree wall, the ball's going to bounce off over there. Kind of similar when you're cutting material with a knife. If you see this bevel drawing here, if I'm cutting directly in here, the energy of the material that I'm cutting is going to be bouncing off the blade at, say, 30 degrees. You convex the bevel, so you take a little relief. Instead of having your bevel be 30 degrees all the way out, you take a relief here, and then once your food's gone this far, it then hits here at, say, 15 degrees and deflects with a lot less energy. Then you make it more convex again, less energy again, less energy again. So essentially, you're trying to make less energy deflect in towards your blade as you push it through the food. And then the convex at the back has a completely different function. If you imagine I've sliced through some potato or some carrot, something that sticks quite well, you have this little gap at the back of the blade that some air can get in, and that prevents the food from sticking quite as hard to the surface. The big issues in cutlery and kitchen knives is food release. You can make your knife an absolutely flat-sided laser. It'll cut so well. However, the suction of the food against the side of the knife will make it feel like it's not cutting as well as a slightly convex edge. So if you can make less of the surface area of the knife stick to the food, you've got less friction essentially working against you. So now I'll show you how I actually go about that. I have a sanding stick. This is just a piece of nylon plastic. I've got a piece of cutting mat on one side, which I use for finishing. Just a little bit of soft give, especially down by the convex edge. So I use the dead flat section for almost all of my sanding, and because I'm at my final grit, I'm going backwards and forwards. Normally, you want to sand diagonal, and then when you switch grit, you go the opposite diagonal, which lets you see if there's a single scratch still going this way, you know you need to keep going that way, basically. So I'm going to sand the middle section of my blade first. One thing you've got to be careful of when hand sanding sand my blades, if you clamp it down to the bench really hard, it's going to bend in the middle here. So I'll keep sanding on the middle, and I don't know if you can see, there's still a little bit of pen here. That's where this is slightly convex, and there's still pen all the way along the edge, which shows you it's still convex that way. So then for the edge, I switch to the soft backing, put it flat, and then just lift by literally a degree. Just the tiniest bit of extra pressure on this side, and then I'm careful to go very slowly to make sure I'm not tilting it over a bunch. This blade is very close to a zero grind, so if I go another 2 degrees that way, I'll start sharpening it. If you start sharpening your blade while you're sanding it, it's quite easy to sand away a little bit too much here, and you end up with your blade, just to exaggerate it, the blade shape ends up with a little, what I call a dead spot, where if you put this flat on a chopping board, it's not going to hit the board here, which is so annoying. That's one of the worst things that you can have happen to a knife. Always make sure you have a little bit of edge thickness left before you start hand sanding. If you've ground all the way to zero, I would recommend just stand your knife up on a piece of sandpaper, rub the edge along twice, maybe on a 400 grit. You just need the tiniest bit, but if it's all the way to a sharp edge, you're going to start to get waves in the blade. In the first stage of sanding, so when I'm at either 120 or a 240 grit, depending on what the grind looks like, I actually do the 3 sections in different directions as well. So the edge I'll do upwards, and the spine I'll do downwards, and then the middle I'll do at a slightly different angle, just so that I can get a really good view of where each of the facets is sitting. And then you blend it all together right at the last minute. This is pretty much finished. The only other thing I do is I will go all from one side all the way down to the other. Now, it's something that especially higher end art makers do, where you're trying to get all of the scratches going in one direction. If you go up and then stop and come back, you always do a little circle. You get a little place where you can see the scratches stop and start. I'm honestly not too worried about that. I'll leave some in there. I'm not going for an art knife finish, but I am going to get any egregious ones out. I want it to look smooth, but I'm not going for every single one out. I kind of liken this to a high-end tractor. They put a heater in it so that the operator doesn't die, you know, when it's cold, but everything that's there is basically to get the job done. So an hour per side to lay down the geometry, half an hour to an hour per side to get it polished. And obviously it depends on the size of the knife. If it's a small knife, minutes. The more your surface area increases, it exponentially takes longer and longer and longer to sand. It was either 3 or 4 days sanding one of Tom's sword blades. That was a fun week. And that was going at it hard as well. I had the blade between here and there, and I was standing up with a big old stick and putting all of my weight on it and really getting in the fuller with this stick and the sandpaper, and that still took quite a few days, but that was Tom's fault. Did a bad job on the grinding. It's aesthetically worth it. The product comes out nicer. In my opinion, it would be very wrong to let a sword go out the door with machine scratches, because they just wouldn't have been done that way historically. Kitchen knives, as long as, even if it's a machine finish, I will do some refining by hand, like with the sandpaper like I've been doing here, and then I'll take it back to the machine and put a Scotch-Brite finish over the top so you can't tell I've hand worked it. But even the machine finish knives I do all have a hand finish step in between, basically. Right, I think I'm done on this side. I'm just gonna move it around in all kinds of different light. I'll probably take it outside and have a little look down it, and if I see any egregious scratches, I'll mark them with a marker pen. This looks okay though. If I take a quick look at the edge, so what this looks like to me now is a blunt knife. I can see very, very fine reflecting light spots, but I can't really see a flat bevel in there. You know, it's very close to a 0 grind. And then I'll sharpen it at probably a fairly high angle compared to sort of conventional wisdom. I'd say I like 20 degrees per side, maybe even a spot more than 20 degrees per side, which is fairly high angle, to be honest, for kitchen knives. I think the conventional wisdom is about 17 degrees per side, sometimes even thinner than that. For me, it depends on how thick I've taken the edge of the knife. So if the edge thickness is, say, around 1/2 or 1/3 of a millimeter, I'll take it really low angle on the edge. Whereas on this one, this is down to about 1/10 of a millimeter, and so I'll give it quite a wide edge angle, and it'll be the geometry that does the primary cutting. The edge angle will help it keep an edge for quite a long time.
Are you interested if I add some quick knife making tips and tricks at the end of every video, or maybe some fun facts about knife making that you wouldn't have known? Please let me know in the comments below if that is of interest to you. A thumbs up would be great. See you in another knife making video, and thanks for watching.